Welcome to Happily Ever Aftermath, the podcast that explores the movies that influenced how we view love and romantic relationships. Yes, there will be spoilers. I'm your host, Diana Roderick Skonnord. Passion, excitement. I think that it's important in a long-term relationship, and that's what I think women find in my novels. They find ways to make their man feel important and comfortable, to let him know that he is the man. You know, so there's no confusion. We're talking about She-Devil from 1989, and I am here with the guy I confuse on a daily basis. Hi, Ryan.
Hi. Am I the man?
The one that I confuse? Yes.
Yay. Thank you. It's good to be here.
So I alluded to this at the last episode, and I can't remember why, but here we are. And I'm a little irritated because by the time this comes out, this movie is no longer free on Tubi.
Yeah,
so that's
bad.
Disappointing. But thanks anyways for finding your way over here to hear us talk about it.
Yeah. Back to kind of a return to form, talking about the movies from when you were younger, formative experiences.
Yeah, I'm not so sure how good I feel about that, rewatching this now on my formativeness, because I went so just like, oh yeah, this definitely created many elements of Angry Diana. Okay, to be honest, Angry Diana was there before. She just had the fans or the flames fanned,
right,
with just like a nice revenge movie.
Right. So is this going to be like a deep dive into Diana's psyche?
I mean, it doesn't have to be a deep dive. I mean, I've been doing this podcast for a long ass time, and
sure,
I think every episode is not a deep dive so much as this entire show has been a collective thing.
Yeah, so this...
Except for Polina's episodes. And guest episodes.
And my episodes.
Yeah.
I'm a guest, technically.
Yes.
According to the show notes.
Technically.
So this movie came out in 1989, and I'm guessing you were a bit older than that when it came onto your radar.
So interestingly enough, I was thinking about how I know this movie unedited, and I know this movie edited, and then I know this movie Diana edited, where I'm just like, don't care about that part. We're just going to get to the parts that I find enjoying. That I enjoy. So
hear the synopsis?
Just for a quick aside, a surprisingly resourceful housewife vows revenge on her husband when he begins an affair with a wealthy romance novelist. And a small shout out to I heard this on Shelf Love, and they covered this movie, and I was just like, I do remember this, but I'm not ready to watch it just yet, so I'm just gonna put a note to watch this later. And so it was nice that the movie came up just in general.
Yeah, I like that synopsis, by the way. Surprisingly resourceful. We're gonna come back to that later, I think.
Okay. Thanks IMDb.
My revenge plan involves starting a successful business. I'd better do that.
Yes, so the movie stars, and I do like the way it is. Okay, so She-Devil, I think of Roseanne Barr, who is the
protagonist.
The protagonist. Although
not top billed,
but not top billed. No. Meryl Streep, multi-Academy Award winner. I'm not sure if she had multiple by that point when this movie came out, but Academy Award winner Meryl Streep.
Yeah, I was reading that apparently, like, this movie was kind of intended to be like a comedy breakthrough for her. That she was already respected as a dramatic actress at that point, and this is like, oh, she can be funny.
And we'll talk about that more
yes,
after.
Please.
And Ed Begley Jr. is I have to apologize, even though it was just my own personal thoughts. I have to apologize to Ed Begley Jr. I'm just like, Ed Begley Jr. is like the guy they're fighting over, and then I'm just like, oh, he's pretty good looking in this movie.
Yeah. I have thoughts about that too, but not about how he's good looking, but
and then the other part of that is just like, oh, it makes sense that the guy doesn't have to be that good looking for a couple of women to be having a conflict over. That happens all the time, where you have
women... if he has other intangible qualities,
money.
But
no, those are tangible.
I so want to get back to... Okay, sorry.
Yes, all right.
Let's finish the cast, because there's some other actors in this movie.
Yes, indeed, like Oscar winner Linda Hunt. And, it's funny, because if you do go back to earlier episodes, as I alluded to before. Paulina had picked out Crossing Delancey, who also included Sylvia Miles. And the whole time of the episode, I'm just like, why do I know this woman's voice so well? Oh, she's Meryl Streep's mom in She Devil with the very blatant accent. And I'm just like, why is it that I can hear her say, I bet you make him worth every penny. and the laugh. So yeah, there's there. I like little pop-ups of Robin Leach and Sally Jessy Raphael, who are absolutely
as themselves.
Well, actually, I think Sally Jessy Raphael is credited as Sally Jessy Raphael, whereas Robin Leach is credited as himself. So I've often wondered about that. But that's okay. Anyone else in the cast you wanted to point out?
No, that's everyone I recognized.
Yeah, although it was funny because the person who was the People magazine reporter, I'm just like, she's familiar, and she appears in various comedies as like,
Deborah Rush?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She appears in various comedies as just like, you're not, freaking, what's her name? Shoot, from Parks and Rec. You're not Amy Poehler, but I can see you playing her sister or possibly mom,
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And she appears in the various things. So I think that's all I got for cast.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get, behind the scenes chat when I asked you about this. I'm like, so what'd you think? You're like, I want to save it for air. And I'm like, So I've been having mild anxiety since we hit on the microphones, which was not immediate. So I slept with some anxiety.
Yeah.
But tell me more.
Well, I expect this podcast might be like for the loyal HEAMCast listeners, maybe a bit of a sequel to our Mrs. Winterbourne episode.
Oh no!
And that was okay. So that was like it bears some similarities to this movie in that it's kind of from the same-ish time period. That was like early 90s, right?
No, that was like
late 90s.
I want to say it looks like 96.
Okay, yeah, and She Devil was 89. So
okay. May I also point out that we had two larger than your average person, let alone larger than your average actress, protagonists. Larger women, basically.
Who?
Ricki Lake?
Is she supposed to be larger than average? Or?
I think by then she'd lost about 20 pounds.
That's not how I was thinking of her, but I was thinking of her having in common with Roseanne Barr for being kind of like received by the critics as a poor casting choice.
And also overshadowed and overbilled by Academy Award winners, respectively.
Very much so, yes.
Yes.
And yeah, so I guess the key difference there was that like when we were talking about Mrs. Winterbourne, I was like, oh yeah, that movie had its problems and I can see why it wasn't received well. But ultimately, it was okay. I still kind of enjoyed watching it because it had some heart and charm to it. And, I've talked in a few different episodes how I'm pretty easy to please when it comes to movies that like, even a very mediocre experience for me is still like, it was still a movie. It was still entertaining. It's better than sitting staring at a wall. And I was just, as I was watching this movie, I was wondering if you were testing my thresholds. It's like, okay, we found the line. This is actually bad. I dislike this.
Oh,
this
wow.
So, yeah.
So this is a first.
I think it's a first for this podcast. Yes. It's not the first time I've ever disliked a movie, but.
Well, no, I know it's not the first time you've ever disliked a movie. Is there another movie that I've made you watch that you have disliked? Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death.
I could see why you liked it. That was not a terrific comedy, but
it had its moments.
It did have its moments.
No, I didn't say it had its moments. I said
and She Devil had its moments too. Like this is,
yeah, it had its lines.
Yeah.
Basically. So okay.
Like Meryl Streep was good in this because she's good in everything, obviously, and there was like the whole like letting her have kind of a comedic breakthrough was like. More of what were supposed to be funny moments for her were kind of like not working. I kind of blame that on the script, but there were definitely moments that she was salvaging and injecting a lot of humor into.
Well,
so
question. Have you seen The Devil Wears Prada?
I think I watched part of it when you were watching it. I've seen 30 or so minutes out of it.
Okay, because I'm just thinking, I'm wondering if this is a precursor to her character in The Devil Wears Prada.
That's interesting.
Where she's just, very rich, very powerful, and able to do what she wants. I mean, and obviously completely different characters in that this one seems very, very quick to crumble under pressure, whereas not so much. Anyways, I just wanted to put the two together. Comedy as well, but
yeah,
she's a completely different character.
But yeah, I mean, I had some kind of like complaints about the way the story was put together and the way the characters were making me feel. But since we're just talking about the cast and like this being a comedy, and in particular this whole like, you know, like I said, I was kind of reading some of the contemporary critical response, and yeah, I kind of echoed my own feelings of like, what were they trying to do with this Roseanne Barr character?
Okay.
Like, cast a comedian in this protagonistic role, again, not top billed, but she is kind of the audience point of view character.
Mm-hmm.
And did she get any funny lines? Like, I remember all the comedy kind of being centered around Meryl Streep and Ed Begley Jr., and meanwhile she's just kind of this like pathos type figure where she's like suffering, and you know she's like the point of view character for this revenge story, and I think that was like, oh, you know, the audience is supposed to share in her triumph or whatever, but it's like, what was supposed to be funny about her? What were supposed to be the comedic talents? Like, and all I could take away was like, oh, is this like the same formula as her sitcom, which help me out on the chronology here. I know that was airing in the 90s, but it started before this movie, right? It started sometime in the 80s.
It's my understanding that this movie came out the hiatus in between her first season.
I see.
So I think she had a first season and then this movie came out.
Yeah, and all I could guess was like, oh, a frumpy woman angrily stands up for herself and her own self-esteem, and that's what passed for a joke in 1989. Like, you're just laughing at the fact that she's like raising her voice and raging at people. Like,
I don't think
that funny?
I don't think it was that so much as that she's raising her voice. I think that okay, there's a lot that I think honestly that she's like, you look like you could fulfill this role. Like literally, like casting her for her looks as you are going to be this person, but eventually you will rise to someone that people will listen to because you are accomplishing.
Right.
And it's not because she's funny or the fact that Roseanne Barr had comedic chops. It was just like people will pay attention to her when we get to her at this point.
I guess, yeah.
I'm speculating. I have no genuine clue. It could just be casting, like, we want to capitalize on the fact that this rising star is got a TV show and this is happening too. I will say, you know, did she do anything funny? I genuinely giggled when she was sent away by her husband because she spilled wine on Mary's dress, and she's at the bar. She's like, hi, I just spilled my wine on Miss Fisher, you know, like that famous author, and she's bouncing. I'm like, I've done that.
That was a little funny.
That was funny. That she's so pleased.
Yeah, and since we're just talking about like the composition of the characters, I wanted to come back to what you were saying about like, okay, so Ed Begley Jr., he plays the unfaithful husband, Bob,
yes,
who kind of gets swept up in this whirlwind affair with Mary Fisher. That's the Meryl Streep character.
Sure.
She's a successful, respected, or at least famous, you know, romance novelist.
Very popular.
Yeah. Multi-millionaire, lives in this huge mansion, has a domestic staff, et cetera, et cetera. And okay, so like trying to figure out the dynamic between them, because like it is totally love at first sight. Like especially on her end, like he's just kind of chatting her up. It's like, oh, hey, hot woman at the party. I'm gonna go, you know, talk to her about, try to impress her with my job in accounting. And
well, he was also there to network, so if he managed to land this huge client,
yeah, exactly.
That's
like it's not
that's
even
a twofer.
Yeah, it's not even clear at first if he's trying to, you know, land her as a client or a mistress, or I'm sure he was thinking both potentially, or like I'll take either one.
I was about to say, like, you know, I think he went for the intention of client. And then when she was very forthright about what she wanted from him, and he's just like, cha-ching.
Right. Yeah, and she is like just immediately smitten with him and so impressed, and like, I don't understand why. Like, as I was sitting there watching the movie, my first thought was like, this character's a little nuts. Like, she's kind of coming across like a crazy person right now. Like, why she's just like immediately infatuated for no discernible reason, and like kind of working backwards a little bit. There's a plot point much later in the movie where Bob is cheating on Mary with, he has this like young, hot office assistant who has been placed in that role as part of Ruth's revenge scheme. And the reason is that, like, she was saying, like, oh, I want to, get together with a rich, successful man and, his money, his career, etc. So it's like that total, stereotype of like the young woman who's wowed by like the kind of like middle-aged man with money and finds that sexy. And like kind of working backwards, it's like Mary was so impressed that he was an accountant and a successful accountant and had all this stuff. And it's like, are we meant to believe that she's just like innately attracted to a financially successful man, even though she is so much richer than him already? Like, I
never really thought about it.
Yeah, she's not young, and she is 41, as we learn later in the movie.
Not
and
30.
she's claiming to be what, 34?
34.
Even a 34-year-old, I don't think would like fall into that stereotype so much of like, wow, an accountant. That's.
What as you were talking about this, and as because again, I was curious because again, apologies to Ed Begley Jr. What is it that this guy has going for him? What's very frustrating is there are certain levels where it's just like, yeah, he is the boss and he has money and he runs the business, so that's attractive.
Does he run the business? I don't think he was even talking about like. Maybe in that dialogue, I think he was just talking about the accounting, not so much like running the accounting firm or anything.
I'm referring to when he was with Olivia.
Sure.
Yeah. By that point, he's very,
he's definitely her boss. But
definitely her boss. Exactly. No, that's what I was referring to for those women who may be attracted to that.
Got it, yeah.
On the other side of it, there is, he and Ruth, Roseanne Barr's character, they got together. He, got her pregnant. And it was, his parents, some parents forced them to marry type of thing.
Right.
And so there is, who knows what it was at the young age. I actually thought with Meryl Streep's character, she was in this state of like sadness because here's an attractive man. Here is this hot mess of a woman who just spilled her drink on me. So I'm already like very upset with her. That's your wife? Mm-hmm. And then as she's been, she's enamored with him for some reason. And then when I think at that point she got into so much sadness because you hear her talk about like all of these people in their wonderful homes. And she's just thinking about the lives that they live that she didn't get to live. And I mean, the funny thing is though, is that people think she's 34, but she's actually 41. So she may be at this point where she can't have children anymore. Or there's people who had these lives that she never is like, I have my money, but what did I really accomplish? Or what is it that I have? And there's that.
Okay. That's a good point. That is actually interesting. I mean, that was at the point where like, I was still kind of trying to get a beat on her character where like, again, my first impression was that she was a little crazy or like eccentric at best.
Well,
and
she also appreciated that he knew how to handle a stain.
Right. Oh, yeah. Interesting.
So, yeah. She's like...
It's just that... Yeah, okay. Yeah, actually, you're putting a few puzzle pieces together that she was kind of like yearning for some kind of like quiet domestic life and
potentially.
That's interesting.
Or then again, her readers are quote unquote the housewives that, live that life. And so she's actually getting quote unquote insight because Ruth has read all of her books and is a huge fan.
If that's where the screenwriter was going, I think they played it a little too subtle actually, because especially against this backdrop of this like kind of broad body, larger than life comedic tone that like if there were like these kind of like character development beats, I think they were getting lost in all of the zaniness that's kind of happening up front, So and like to that point, like as she was musing in the car, like because you're right, that is a very interesting line, but at the time I was thinking like, oh, is this just her like artistic eccentricity, like she's some kind of like a head in the clouds type who's having these thoughts that are just kind of like out of nowhere or...
Yeah, I did appreciate the scene where her and Bob are having a fight talking about like, I am an artist,
right? And
how dare you insult my wonderful friends. So she's very dramatic as well, obviously.
Yes.
But
yes.
Even the stuff
that's effectively using your Meryl Streep.
And how I love the part where they're having the fight and he dragged her off the bed. She's like, no.
That was hilarious. That was really good.
She's pretty good. But it's interesting that you bring that up because when I started making notes for this, I could think of just like, I am getting a feeling of, and I was crossing my fingers that it would be similar conversation of when I watched Back to School. Mm-hmm. Because here is a comedian this isn't their strength, but they have done acting, so let's put them in this scenario and hopefully the fun will come from that. But it wasn't done the same way because Rodney Dangerfield was the star. And he
Yes.
also put his probably massages on there because originally that movie was supposed to be like he was supposed to be a working class guy.
Right.
But instead he's just like, no, let's like make me really, really rich.
Yeah.
And that really turns the dynamic on its head. Whereas with her, she's like a suffering housewife. And then it's just like, I'm going to blow shit up literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
And it's to me, it's fun. Like, it's not funny now. Watching somebody do all of those dangerous things in a home.
I know.
And watching a house explode, I'm just like, oh, that's supposed to be very satisfying because she's trying to blow up her entire marriage and destroy the house that this man did. But all I could think of is just like, but this isn't satisfying.
I know. Okay, I'm so glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about that. Okay, so like number one, there's the part of it where it's kind of taking you out of the movie where it's like, this is really dangerous. Like you could see the debris flying off. She's like probably damaging her neighbors' houses, could have easily hurt someone.
Yeah.
There's going to be like firefighters rushing in there who are going to be put in danger because
Honey, she was fine, okay? The green screen had her covered.
Yes, I know. She definitely did the cool action hero walk away from the explosion without looking at it and then turned around to look at it. And then I was immediately thinking like, she's probably better with her back to it because there's a lot of like bits of wood flying everywhere and those are going to go into her face. And
she also had excellent timing.
Yeah. So setting aside the fact that like arson is illegal for a reason, for like safety reasons, even if you are burning down your own house. Okay. So like, okay, fine. You know, a Hollywood artistic license. Let's set that aside. Even so, she was like, she had 2 children who lived in that home. There was some dialogue about like, what about all of our possessions?
Gone.
Like,
honestly, like, I did appreciate that. What about our clothes? Gone. What about my tapes? Gone. Everything's gone. Are you concerned because they lost all their stuff, or because that was the point?
I'm concerned because she was rather cruelly uprooting her children's lives and throwing them into a new home environment, which like...
Small aside that I did not read the book, but there is a book, and there's also a miniseries about it too. I don't think they adequately portrayed that the children were assholes too.
Yeah, I got some notes like that. Like, okay, so these kids are definitely supposed to be unsympathetic. They're like, I don't know, spoiled rich kids or
they're not though. They're just spoiled and basically casting her off as like, eh.
Yeah, I guess, but like nonetheless, they're little kids. They're going to be products of their environment, and you're just like, okay, their parents are getting divorced. There's an inevitable amount of stress, but like adding on to that, they're losing their. I know, but I'm just saying, like, yeah, this like. Throw all of the reasons you want for the kids to be unsympathetic to the audience. This is still cruel,
Yeah. Cruel to them, but the whole point is... But okay, that's also an interesting point, too.
Yeah.
Is that growing up, watching this when I was younger, it was hilarious how I thought she was going after Mary.
Right.
Bob was the real target, but Mary got so much shit. She didn't get the worst of it, but she got a lot.
Mary almost, until the very end, she seemed to be suffering more.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just because she's so naturally melodramatic and she's expressing it more than Bob was, but...
But also, you have to look at the shift and what was the problem. I'm willing to wait. In fact, I thought about this too, because her housekeeper, her maid, and her butler, which I don't even want to necessarily touch the fact that she was just sleeping with her butler.
Yeah.
And it became a whole thing when she brought Bob into the picture. But the fact that the maid very angrily quit because she said, I took this job because I only had to cook and clean for one person and one dog. Now I got the mother, the lover, his kids, their dog.
Yeah.
And then she quits. And all I could think,
sorry,
but before that even happened, like all of the things that were happening, the kids trashing everything and, doing a satellite dish and all this other stuff. I'm like, wait a minute. Why is it that Mary hasn't just hired another person to supplement that? And then I thought, wait a minute. Why should she have to? Why should she? It should be Bob who's doing it. And Bob was probably thinking, why would we do that? We already have somebody. And also I have Mary. Ruth, this unthing where it's just like Ruth was a stay-at-home mom, and so it was a given who's going to raise the kids, who's going to do that. And I think Mary just kind of went on to the whole like, but this is how a mother is a mother, and so she went for it instead of just like, why am I not outsourcing this?
Yeah, like all 3 of these people have some growing and learning to do, I think, clearly.
I mean,
and yeah, it's just it did not read to me as a straightforward case of like, Ruth is the is the aggrieved party who's being vindicated by her epic revenge story.
She's clearly a long-suffering woman, but
Yeah,
I
that's
don't. And her husband is an asshole.
I know, and that is like I was kind of pondering like how did she get into this marriage? Like he's so like okay, Bob is so profoundly amoral and like unapologetically self-serving.
He's fucking charismatic as hell though, and that's unfortunate.
I guess, yeah, I know.
As
Like
the viewers, it's really hard to, but at the same time, you notice he starts making speeches when Mary's just like, "You're still on probation." He just makes a big speech in front of everybody, talking about how lucky he is to have her.
That's true. Actually, I'm glad we're having this conversation because as I was digesting the movie and thinking to myself, I was thinking like, I don't. Okay, number one, I'm not at all sold on like Ruth ever having been in love with Bob in the first place because he's just such a fundamentally noxious person. And number two,
when you're
it's
young
like,
and dumb,
right? And number two, like why should she even be that upset about wanting to keep the marriage? Because like,
what do you mean?
well, I know. Okay, she's like spurned because she's cheating on rather he's cheating on her, and that's going to hurt no matter what. But it's like sitting in the role of the audience, it's hard not to think like, yeah, but what are you really losing? You know, a marriage to the worst man on earth. You know,
I think she was okay. So other things. Thank you, TV tropes. They alluded to the fact that he didn't come home that night.
Yeah.
And she's just like, he probably just, there was a tire blowout and it got late. And basically he comes in and says exactly that, which people could lead to believe that this is just, this has happened many
because he tells almost the same lie to Mary later that his car broke down and that's why he was out all night with his new mistress. And yeah, actually, and having this conversation, like it is actually helping me put some of that into place. Like number one, the fact that he is, definitely charismatic when he wants to be. And also the story about, her unexpectedly getting pregnant and getting cajoled into a marriage. I had honestly forgotten about that until you brought it up. And yeah, it's well,
he made it a point to yell at everybody at that dinner party.
Right.
So
right.
Once again.
Yeah. And and it definitely makes sense that Ruth would like want to maintain her domestic status quo no matter how happy they were together. So I'm not saying like, oh, it's weird that she's upset about this marriage dissolving.
I just wonder how...
Nonetheless, if you're trying to garner the audience's sympathy, it does not line up super well. So I'm
just wondering how much of it is because it was Mary Fisher. I'm sure before it was various assistants and like...
Right, because prior to that, Ruth loved Mary's books. And I think I even made a quip during the movie. It's like, oh, you're losing your husband and your reading hobby? That's like a twofer,
And that's the second time we've said twofer in this entire podcast episode.
Oh, did we? I forgot.
I did.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Never
mind. So yeah, like I was saying before, there's definitely a lot going on with these characters. And and again, it's definitely using your Meryl Streep. I'm not really sure if it's using your Roseanne.
It definitely wasn't, in my opinion.
Right. But at the same time, though, like...
Then again, I'm not... Well, okay, I'm trying to remember what was, like, her comedic talent in her show, which I didn't really watch that much at the time. And looking back, I remember a lot of the comedy coming from the supporting cast.
There is that, and also I think it had a lot to do with the fact that it's in scenarios that you don't typically see in sitcoms.
Right. Yeah.
And it was more relatable. It's the fact,
I mean that was a time when people were falling all over themselves talking about Roseanne and The Simpsons and Murphy Brown, kind of like...
Oh, and dinosaurs.
And, sure. Yeah, like bucking the trends of the sitcoms. And it's almost like a meta joke that there's this like cranky kind of off-putting persona as the main character. Like the fact that there's a sitcom centered around that itself was maybe kind of funny to audiences at the time.
It was probably...
I'm speculating.
My question is, was it different?
It was definitely different.
Oh, wait, no. Archie Bunker. Never mind.
Well, I mean, which was also... kind of seen as a mold-breaking show at the time, so...
Sure. Okay. But what I'm getting at is whether or not that they, like, used her talents adequately or not, I don't think that's what I was concerned about. It's the fact that she fit this mold.
Right.
The suffering housewife. And so that worked out pretty well. I also wrote down, because I mentioned Back to School, but I would say this movie also felt a lot like Revenge of the Nerds. And again, and helpful John Goodman's in there. So
sure.
So that's, throwing it all together. And so for me, it's, if I can go to the growing up and watching this kind of thing, I'm not going to say this movie is responsible for it because no movie is responsible for it, but it did help enforce this whole thing of being like a bigger girl when I was younger, and just having somebody just sort of fight back. But I would also say the fact that she's going after her husband, but all the collateral damage along the way, I really thought that she was just going after Mary. And this really created this whole like us versus them mentality of pretty girls, pretty successful girls.
Oh, the movie was leaning so hard into that with Nurse Hooper.
And that's what really broke my heart when we got to there.
It got like it wasn't even subtext. It was like this close to saying like
no, there was no close to. It's a shame though, Hooper. I thought women like you and me needed to stick together.
Yeah, I know. The only subtext there is what do they mean like you and me? Like
right, and that's actually what kind of broke my heart.
I know, and it was kind of like if you're being charitable, you could say like, oh, women who have been kind of overlooked by the world, or consigned to these roles of like, oh, she works in a nursing home. That's like the only, or
even they're looked as harmless or only good for our own purposes and not worth as a person.
Right. And I guess like the subtext that everyone is thinking is like ugly women need to stick together. Yep. But interestingly, there's also like this whole weird professional angle to it of like women who, don't have anything to contribute economically. And that kicks off this whole other power fantasy.
Yeah.
Of starting this employment agency,
right?
Which is like this very, I must imagine that's a very 80s fantasy of like, oh no, I'm not a useless person cast out by society. I'm going to become a successful entrepreneur. I'm going to
start my own. I'm going to start my own casino.
Right.
If I may, because we talked about this before we got started. 2 quotes were a possibility.
Yes.
And I said, if I'm going to be my very cynical, angry self, I would start the podcast with this, but I went for the Mary Fisher one.
Yes, the quote that really spoke to you when you were a kid.
When I was younger, this actually spoke to me. Some women are born beautiful. They make it look easy. But most women have to put a little time and effort into their appearance. And then there are those of us who need all the help we can get. Like me.
And that makes me sad because, it almost feels like
sad.
It makes me sad that this movie is like preying on people's on insecurities and saying like, it's like, oh, if you think that, you're so unattractive and the world is passing you over, you're right. But you can have this epic revenge fantasy. Isn't that great? It's like not.
Shut up. If you take away my epic revenge fantasy, then I have nothing.
Can't we take away the low self-esteem?
Okay. I know you're joking, but you're also being serious. And my first response to that is go fuck yourself.
Okay, fine. Not that I didn't say it'd be easy, but I mean, it's like the.
Wait. Let me see if I can get this straight. This tall, blonde, light-eyed man who is trying to tell me what I should be doing about my self-esteem. Me.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that this movie is like very cynically buying into these I don't know exactly how to put it, but like this movie is like not doing a lot to fight against these sort of like social mores that it's casting a light on. Like
it's 1989.
I know, and it has a lot to say about like superficially valuing beauty and superficially valuing financial success, but it's like it's like, oh, you can like that's all true, but there's more to life than, I don't know. It maybe it's because I'm watching it from a different decade, but just the way it was kind of like inspecting Ruth's self-worth and especially Hooper's self-worth, it just really rubbed me the wrong way. It left a bad taste in my mouth.
Well,
that's all I can say.
I understand that. Again, I watched it in the 90s, so it didn't feel good. Rewatching it was difficult, especially the commercial of the agency they started, feeling useless, and it had 3 women.
Oh God, I know.
And then it flipped it over to where they were, dressed professionally and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, all of this is just like, okay.
Yes, you're explaining it better than I could. Yes,
this feels odd and off, and I don't like it, and I get it. But the baseline of just like when she was monologuing about how these are the women that the world had thrown away.
If you're feeling useless because you're ugly, don't worry, you're not that ugly. Like that's. That's what the damn commercial was.
And also another thing that didn't help was that like one implied like the woman was a janitor, the other one implied that the other one was probably a sex worker, and all I could think of was just like, well, we need janitors, that's not a bad thing. And I think now lots of custodians make a shit ton more than like your average office job. So again, work is I don't know.
Leave behind your valueless union job, and
again, it may have just been, I don't know, the 80s.
It was definitely the 80s.
It was just barely the 80s. Well, definitely when they filmed it, it was the 80s. But
there were still shoulder pads and perms and
those. I told you that in the beginning of the movie, I'm just like, why does her hair look better now than when she was at the gala party?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I'm just like, those are some nice curls. And also you notice, and I am going to be very generous with this movie, that she becomes more attractive as the movie progresses.
True.
But you don't see her like trying to put more effort to it like in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where she's trying this and she's trying this, but instead losing the difficulty of being beholden to being a housewife and mother for Bob. I don't think she was doing it for herself, but for Bob. She was able to, I'm going to say this. Confidence is sexy.
I was going to say, I would like to think that she was becoming more naturally attractive because she was feeling happier and more relaxed.
The stress kind of goes away, but like the mole goes away entirely. But you also see that there's like possibly a treatment that she's using to get rid of it. But
yeah, I could see one scene there was like a little circle of concealer on the mole.
I don't know if it was concealer.
Or some kind of.
I might be doing like now technology of like, oh, I thought that was a medicated pad. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that. And then by the end of the movie, it almost looked like, so like the mole isn't real, it was makeup, and by the end of the movie it looked like she just wasn't wearing the makeup, which maybe was to suggest that the character had it surgically removed. I don't know.
Could be. Yeah. I don't know, and that it doesn't matter as much.
Mm-hmm.
I do like, again, the generic concept of women not so much finding their place, because ultimately I think they're trying to find their place in the man's world,
right?
But it's rough, but at the same time I'm younger and all I can think of is like, yeah, you don't need a man, and fuck you, Bob, in prison,
right?
There are things that are just like not great, of course, and also kind of playing into it, just like how Bob is now under investigation and they're just like, it's great, it's Judge Phillips, he'll be here, and then you pan over and it's Judge Brown, and it is a older black woman who's like, in the vein of Hooper and in the vein of Ruth, in that she's just very,
The subtext is there. This movie definitely has a visual language when it comes to women, exemplified by that commercial and like the scenes of the business where we're literally seeing like maybe 30 odd women, like almost every single one, like over 40 and overweight, and like, oh, these are like this thing that Ruth was talking about in that dialogue with Hooper, a few scenes ago, like the overlooked women, the discarded women, like this is them, and it's this very like it. I don't know, like I don't want to.
You want to what'll make it even worse, though?
Yeah.
I'm willing to wager that Ruth was supposed to be like the 34 that Bob was freaking out that Mary wasn't.
Yeah.
And it's a teenager, and if she got pregnant young, so she's probably in her mid-30s.
Yeah, and I guess like I said, I found it uncomfortable because the movie was almost kind of establishing its own visual language of stereotype and prejudice, and like when Judge Brown comes and sits down, it like kind of pokes that part of your brain that was set up earlier. It's like, oh, she's one of like those women who like needs the employment agency. I mean, she personally doesn't. She's a judge, so clearly she has a career at least. But she's one of those like unattractive women or whatever. It's like.
Well, I mean, the shorthand is. It's not Judge Phillips, so that's already not in the bag. But not only is it not Judge Phillips, it's not another white man.
Right.
Instead, it's just a black woman.
I know, yeah. And I can totally respect the subtext of it if it were...
But also, I don't respect the subtext of it because it's automatically just like, you think that she herself could not be blown into a society that looks favorably upon...
Yeah, no, exactly. I was saying, it's like I could have respected the subtext if this were a different movie, but it was so
it's not sub
playing. Yeah, exactly. It was totally playing into that other stuff. And
so again, I understand why you I don't feel great about a lot of it too. And you're just watching this without the nostalgia and or the connection or even anything to it.
Yes,
so,
I appreciate you sharing it with me as a historical piece of Diana's history, nonetheless. But,
well, I mean,
it was interesting in that light. Certainly.
I mean, it was indoctrinating me early in that whole, because I had such insecurities growing up, being a bigger girl, and I was thinking, I don't want to put it this way because this is my sad confession that I'm hoping doesn't make me sound like the biggest asshole ever. But like when I was younger, I would lean towards girls who were not like fashion conscious and or, you know, quote unquote pretty, which is so unfair because my friends are fucking pretty.
Am I out of line if I accuse this movie of reinforcing those insecurities in order to sell the movie to you?
I don't know if it's that egregious. Well, okay. I will point out the script was written by two men.
Okay.
Based on a book by a woman, though.
With huge departures, right? Huge
departures.
Yeah.
And I do like some of the ways that they changed it.
In the book, his name was Babo, I read.
well, let me put it this. Again, I have not read the book. I'm really curious if it'd be worth it to watch it. But I read the synopsis of it, and I'm just like, I don't know if I could handle this because it's so much more like evil. And that's kind of the point, that they're trying to lighten it up for the sake of comedy and making this a vehicle. So.
I'm very curious, and I'm not asking you, but I would like to know if in the book Ruth was more of like a, you know, gray area, quasi-sympathetic protagonist who, you know, maybe the audience isn't supposed to be.
No, I think it was
on board with
worse. And she was actually like getting plastic surgery to, you know, like become a Mary.
Right. Oh, yeah. I think I remember reading that on Wikipedia.
I don't know. I'm not sure where I come down on this. I mean, I can only speak to, I do like Meryl Streep. And here's the other thing that I'm also unfortunately thinking about is Roseanne Barr, real life not Roseanne Barr anymore. So Roseanne, however she's calling herself now, not a great person offline from my own personal and political views. Meryl Streep, I don't want to, but I worship at the altar of Meryl Streep because she is very talented, and she's also like proving talent, and you know, even as she gets older, she is a beacon of just like, but be like Meryl Streep and you could still be worshipped in your older years.
And it's weird that like the even leaving aside the present day kind of reality creeping in, like even probably contemporarily, I think the actress's natural charisma is kind of bleeding into the characters and kind of making you like Mary more than you're probably supposed to, just because she's, you know, because she's kind of funny, and she even makes her even when like her character is being totally like histrionic and throwing these tantrums, like Meryl Streep is kind of making it funny and charming, so you're kind of charmed by the character.
I don't think it was charming so much as that when she was trying to get the family to finally like knock it off, I was like, good for you, because you have been long suffering this whole time.
And her whole character, like at all parts of the story, she has this like thing where she kind of flies off the handle and does these melodramatic rants, and like about half of them are like reasonable.
Oh yeah.
And the other half are her just being a basket case.
A basket case, or just like buying into the rich selfishness. Like when she takes all the People magazines and then just throws them in the garbage.
Right.
When I was younger, my first thought was just like, well, now people aren't going to pay for them. They're just going to take them because they're in the trash. And you just made it worse, lady.
Ooh, free gossip about Mary Fisher.
Free People magazine. Yeah, why not? And so, but there's also other parts where like, again, thank you TV tropes for this. It's like parts where when Bob is taking Mary and Ruth home, and he's just like, oh, we're just going to drop you off here, Ruth. She's like, oh no, it's fine. It's only 4 blocks away. Even Mary goes like, really?
Yeah.
And the other part where Garcia is like dancing and groping with the young daughter. And she actually just like, you know, get your filthy hands off of her. Right. It's supposed to be like the perspective. The perception is not like, oh my God, you're not, you know, you've rejected me and you've gone after her. It's so much like, you sick fuck, get your hands off of her.
Yeah, totally.
So, and that's nice. And here's the other thing.
And you're like, and like in those moments, I was sitting puzzling, like, is the audience supposed to be on Mary's side at this point? Like, where's the, it's like, because again,
Bob is
bouncing around like a Super Bowl, you know?
Right. It's like, it doesn't help that she, you know, is going into this affair because she's being selfish because she wants Bob for reasons we can't understand. And even afterwards, when things aren't going well, but like her career, not so great either, she's just like, you know, her novel, Love in the Rinse Cycle, your protagonist has 2 children and a husband named Bob. And by the way, I think that Bob is a beautiful name.
Yeah.
It's just, again, it's so sympathetic. And she finally is standing up for herself. She's like, I'm going to exercise my right to take this to another publisher.
Right.
And I'm like, good for you. But also at the same time, is that just like no one's listening to her artistic reason? She's gone through a lot. So, but I will point this out because we both had the same reaction and I knew it was coming, but forgot about how much it was. It's supposed to be hilarious with the chaos of the children, that her dog jumps off a cliff because it was chasing after
okay, yeah.
It's played for laughs because
like,
it's like
the kid's got her dog killed accidentally. Isn't that hilarious? Isn't it? Because it's like a little what was it, a poodle or like some kind of like a miniature poodle maybe?
Yeah. And it's just like, oh no.
I was flummoxed because like, oh, Diana loves this movie and it has not one but 2 dead pets.
Yes.
2 pets got killed in this movie.
Yeah.
What is that is not the Diana I know.
I know. Well, honey, back then it was a dog that, well, I didn't like dogs as much back then.
You made me pause the movie, pray to look up spoilers about whether the dog was going to be okay.
Okay, I am now older.
Sorry.
And more fragile.
And more sensitive.
Yeah, and then it was
just... sorry, rant over. Please continue.
Well, no, back then it was stupid rich lady and her crappy dog, and now it's just like, oh, puppy. Oh, poor woman and her puppy. Because even... I don't wish that experience on my worst enemies.
Yeah.
So, not funny anymore, movie. You hear me, 1989 scriptwriters? I didn't bother to look up your name.
Mm-hmm.
There's
the elaborate headstone with the French inscription on it.
This isn't going to follow the usual format because...
Which I translated, by the way.
Right. So did the internet. This isn't going to follow the usual format because this is different. This is a departure. This is not a love origin story. So I am going to keep rambling for a minute, but I do have to point out, what did you think of the music of this movie? The scores?
Oh, it
because it got me right back into my youngness where I'm just like, oh my God, this music, it's so dramatic. And the lightning crashes and the
taken in isolation, the score was very impressive.
Yeah.
It was Howard Shore working his butt off to
Academy Award winner Howard Shore. I believe he has as many Academy Awards as Meryl Streep.
Delivering a very impressive effort to, like, I don't know, at points it almost felt like he was supposed to be like in a Danny Elfman mode, like make sure to like elevate
back to school.
Elevate the quirkiness, you know, and
back to school.
And the rest of the time, I was just thinking, like, "Oh, buddy, you don't need to try this hard. This is just like."
But at the same time, we're all better for it. But
I'm not sure the movie is better for it, but
we as people are better for it because this is somebody putting in an effort to something.
Yes,
that we get to benefit from, even though it's at a movie that you think is bad,
right?
As you called it. So, do you think in a different life, because you brought up Mrs. Winterbourne, Ed Begley Jr. would be in a like mummy movie as our hero?
I would. Yeah, I mean, I definitely like him as an actor. He's got he's definitely got his own range and comedic chops.
Remind me that at some point, not for the podcast, I will want to revisit the movie Greedy.
Yeah.
I mentioned it in an earlier podcast, but Ed Begley Jr. is in it as well. And it's probably not going to hold up in many, many ways, but I'm really curious.
Right. I'm trying to think what I know him from. Arrested Development primarily. And
awesome.
You've never seen Better Call Saul. He's in that quite a bit.
Is he?
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, he plays it's like a recurring character.
That feels right for Better Call Saul. Mm-hmm. Like the way Michael McKean's in that movie.
Yes. And he predictably, he's great in it, of course.
Well,
so, yeah.
I mean, yeah, great. Now I'm thinking of what is Colonel Mustard? Martin Mull, also in Arrested Development, so that doesn't help at all.
Right.
and it makes sense that they're all doing the thing. You talked about love at first sight, and they blatantly like Mary and Bob, with their eyes and the immediate. And I don't get it.
It was truly bizarre to me. But
do you even want to think? Did Bob love anyone in this movie? Besides himself. That's what I'll ask. Because it's just like, did he love Mary? Because he's immediately like, oh, that stain's gonna set. And yes, that is my wife. And Mary, you're the only woman I've ever been faithful to.
Okay, that was a good line. That was a funny one, I'll admit. Okay, yes. And I think the movie made it pretty clear that Bob loved his house, his career, his freedom, and maybe in an abstract way his kids. But
that wasn't on the list. She did not blow up the children.
Oh, family was the third thing. Yes. Right. So,
yep.
Right.
Which is unfortunate because she went after Mary Fisher's mother in an attempt to cut off, to do the family for Bob. So
right.
So that's Okay.
What was the point of that? To alienate us from his kids, or
I think it's to
did
throw.
Mary kind of...
I think it's to throw more chaos into there because the mother knew all of these secrets about how she wasn't this perfect person.
Right.
She had her sedated in a nursing home.
So just to make sure we're not getting confused, Bob and Mary never got married, right?
Don't think so.
Because Mary was like one time referred to as the kid's stepmother, but probably in more of like a metaphorical way.
I think he was doing that to really push the idea of you wanted this role, not necessarily legally speaking.
Yeah.
And I think that's another reason why it should have been Bob who was bringing in more help, but he didn't. And why would Mary pay for that when it's just,
Yeah. And like, clearly Bob loved his kids, if only because like the movie stopped short of painting him as a complete sociopath. And also that movie at the scene at the end of the movie where his kids are visiting him in prison, and he seems pretty genuinely happy to see them. So
I think like he always seemed very happy to see the kids when he would get home,
Yeah,
here's my princess.
I think so.
I think that's because he assumed that they're just extensions of him and therefore deserve as good as he does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that. Like any wrong they do is not really their problem. It's well, if Ruth had this all taken care of, this wouldn't be such a big deal.
Yeah. And to the extent that he feels any affection for his women, it's, physical attraction and status symbols.
Yes.
And yeah, that was to the extent that like Mary was like immediately infatuated and with him when they first met. I think it was like reciprocated on that level. And then like immediately the same thing when like when he first met Olivia, it's like, oh, you're hired. Like that's just that was gross.
And how?
That was
I mean, well characterized.
Yeah.
But
just like
yeah,
clearly meant to be gross even in 1989. And just the fact that social mores around like workplace power dynamics have changed since then, like has only gotten worse. Has only gotten worse with age.
And it does not help that that's what she was after anyways, to find a rich and powerful man and marry him. So the fact she giggled a lot. That's
just strange. I don't know, that makes me feel bad for the society that character was raised in. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But look how quickly it became just like, poor Olivia. She learned a lot of lessons about life and love. But more importantly, she learned the secret access codes to all of Bob's clients.
Yes.
Again, she's being used as well, and that's unfortunate.
Also, I love just sitting here from the 2020s, like, also, poor InfoSec. It's poor information security practices.
Oh, it's one of those expressions.
Poor,
I'm sorry, honey, did you say InfoSex? What?
No, let's just say, like of the ways Bob was professionally irresponsible from a present day point of view, should not be exploiting your power dynamic to sleep with someone who reports to you, and also should not be sharing passwords because
his assistant, so that happens all the time.
Okay, well, like they should each have their own account with which to access, like, there should be like a different level of authorization for.
Oh my God, I'm on board with what you're just saying right now. I just don't, I'm weirdly defending the movie because I didn't know what it was like in the 80s.
Right. I mean,
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. Several access, and then I would have turned it off. No, that's at work, honey. Let me leave that at work.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So before we move on, if you'll forgive me getting a little bit saucy and playing with the format of the show, I would actually, seeing as how I'm speaking to someone who's kind of a devotee of this movie, I would, if you'll indulge me, like to flip the formula on its head a little bit. And instead of asking what happens before, or rather, instead of asking what happens after, I really want to ask you what happened before the movie. I want to hear your mental picture of how Bob and Ruth wound up in the first place. Because like we got a little bit of backstory on
how they ended up married,
on the pregnancy, and they were kind of forced into marriage. Mm-hmm. But like, was Ruth happy? Was Bob happy? Was Bob thinking of Ruth as like a possession and a status symbol from the beginning? Was she more attractive when she was younger? Where was your imagination in this as you were watching this movie?
I mean, if I really was to think about it, I don't see Bob being athletic in high school. I can imagine them in high school together, mm-hmm. in some classes together. Mm. They don't seem especially like cliquey. If we're talking about 80s things like that, she was probably just, there in classes, and he was also there in classes. Like I said, not a football guy or any of the popular anything.
That's a good point. And what decade would they have been in high school? Like the 70s, probably, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting because Ruth definitely, like, personality-wise, seems to be the kind of introverted type, so we can definitely extrapolate that they would have run in different social circles.
I don't like that she has no friends, so it's very easy for her to do this.
Yeah.
So it really, I'm wondering if that she lost all of her friends because of the bad marriage.
Oh, that could be. Yeah.
She has like no mom friends, no social circles. We don't know anything about her parents.
Got pregnant young, kind of fell out of her social life with all of her single friends.
You know what I
Yeah.
can really see though is Bob having a Letterman jacket, even though he's not in any sports whatsoever,
Okay.
because of the status. Look at me in my Letterman jacket.
I don't know what the rules were back then. When I was in high school, they had academic letters, but
Well, no, that's kind of my point, though, is that I'm sure it expanded as we got to this point with all the
Yeah.
different letters and stuff like that. But, like, you know, the jackets, I see it with the jocks
right.
back then. And I
Yeah.
can see him getting one, even though, like, he wasn't even there. I doubt he was, like, equipment manager or anything like that by proxy, but I don't see him being, like, class president or anything to that effect. I just see him like being at the precipice of trying to get to it and being able to talk to people who are part of it but not getting anywhere. And I can see him seeing an opportunity with Ruth. And I bet you she was a little bit more outgoing, but I can't see anything that she would be in. If we're talking about home ec classes and things like that, I don't think she did any of that. But it's really hard, and that does not speak well to the character, because who the hell could she have possibly been? But then she got sucked into this whole thing, and she wasn't even good at that either. So I can't draw on anything, except she is talented in other ways. Because she can definitely take an opportunity and spin it to just like, oh, you're saying he cheats his own clients? Tell me more.
Right. I had a plot question about that, by the way. Was she... Okay, it was framed as though she was learning that for the first time from Olivia, and it's also very easy to extrapolate that, like, her whole plan of... and, okay, I'm gonna try not to just fly off on a tangent and gripe about how, like, oh, she starts this employment agency and then she drops a flyer through the through the slot of the of Bob's office, which inevitably leads to him hiring someone from her own agency, which is like, okay, what if that didn't happen? But setting that aside,
Did you see the flyer, by the way?
right?
There was an
yeah,
incredibly attractive woman on there.
that is true. Okay,
And the other
yeah.
part of it said special for new clients.
Right. Yeah.
So I can
and
see him
knows
like,
Bob so well that okay, fair enough. All right, she knew exactly how to bait the hook, I guess. But yeah, like, and from that we can sort of assume that she knew that Bob was a crooked accountant, and that by like placing an assistant there who would be able to like learn all the codes and bring the security access credentials back to Ruth, but like. That was the first time we as the audience learned that Bob was embezzling from his clients. That was never established earlier in the movie.
you know what?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been surprised if she was just using Olivia as a means of just like getting the affair started.
Yeah, exactly.
And this fell into her lap.
That was how it read to me. It was yeah. So yeah, just like that was opportunistic. So yeah, and I wasn't sure which way we were even supposed to understand that. So.
Right. That was always my
because
assumption.
because Bob like kind of never really talked to Ruth, and it doesn't make sense that she would be privy to so many details about his professional life that she would have known.
But she knew him so well with certain things. This is my assumption. I bet you Bob never had enough success to actually embezzle anything from his clients.
Right.
And now when he hit this higher level, it became like, oh my God, I can get interest, like interest bearing off of this. This is brilliant, Bob. And then he just started doing it.
Right. And the only thing that confuses that is that like she had that list of like Bob's assets, and the fourth one was freedom.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, well, if her plan from the beginning was to deprive him of his freedom, sending him to jail for stealing from his own clients was like the only way we saw that she had to do that. Like, did she have a different plan before that? Was she planning to frame him? Was this more like freedom in the abstract than literally putting him in jail?
It could have been.
Yeah.
It's also possible that if he blew up the family
Right.
and like Mary left, and again, and freedom can mean different things. She might have killed him. She could have killed him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
was she ever investigated for arson? Because
so I saw some photos that
there
are
was
on
a lot of evidence that was set on purpose. There were appliances and bathtubs and
Two
forks
things.
and toasters and
Two things. Number one,
Yeah.
I saw some photos that looked like they were from deleted scenes, and the insurance adjuster, because it's her in that dress, and you can see.
What? Oh my God! Wait, hold on. Let me stop you right there. Let me guess. The arson investigator was an unattractive middle-aged woman.
No.
Okay, sorry.
It was an unattractive middle-aged looking man.
I see.
according to the photo. Apologies to that actor.
Okay.
But remember when she hands the card to him?
Yeah.
The photo is just her and the guy with a clipboard, like holding a card to her. So.
Okay, maybe it.
Yeah.
And
And she says, "We'll ask our insurance adjuster. He'll tell you." So.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm off the plot tangent. So.
Uh-huh. Did I ever answer the question? Like, I don't know exactly what Ruth was, but I bet you they were in classes together. I bet you he charmed her and then had sex with her because he wanted to have sex with somebody.
Yeah.
And that's what happened.
She was cute when she was younger, you think?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I bet you she was insecure and became, and he could feel it and he used it.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
That's what I got.
Yeah.
That's what I can feel. I'm making that which Bob is now into what Bob was then. And that's, like I said, he knows how to charm, and I think he's perfected it over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe he knew how to do it then.
Yeah. Okay. So, do we want to move into what happens next?
I'm not entirely sure, because we actually get that with Mary writing a new book.
We do. Yeah.
Bob trying to kind of amend his ways of realizing this is what life is when you're not being you're not charming, and you don't have it all coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of implied that Ruth goes off and continues with her agency, and
yeah. So I would say I think I can make at least a modest prediction for each of those three characters. I think, because like I want to say it was the last scene of the movie where Bob appears was him talking to his kids in prison, and he seems so happy about that, which is like literally the first moment in the movie you've not just that Bob was unsympathetic, but that's almost the first part he actually comes across as like an actual human being. Yep. So I would like to think that, having been humbled and broken down to nothing by this, that, despite family being the third of the four assets, that clearly he hasn't lost that entirely. He does still want to have a relationship with these kids, and that would probably be like the saving grace for his, life after he gets out of prison and has no career to speak of.
What's really weird, though,
because they're not going to let him be an accountant again, clearly. I mean,
no. But I don't know, honey. Like
right.
Some people get second chances more so than others.
This is true.
The other part of it is this is my sad reality of how I view it, but I can see once prison is over and once he tries to start to get back on his feet, he's going to be a great father and while trying to get back on his feet. And then once he starts to get any footing, he's going to become a bad father again.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah, me too. Because as weird as it is, I can see him charming another woman and moving in with her, and that being a thing until he can move on up again.
I know. I would. There's a more optimistic part of me that wants to believe that he would be, humbled by this experience and actually learn and grow from it. But the movie didn't really lay the groundwork for that, and he definitely is someone who's been getting away with this his whole life.
And you want to know why I don't think that's the case? I think he's so up in his head again. Where remember when he gave the kids the cookies? And he said, "I want you to be honest." And they're just like, "Oh, these are good, Daddy." And he's eating them too. He's like, "Yeah, right." So I honestly don't think that. I think he's still thinking that he's still amazing, even though he's pretty terrible at these things.
I mean, if he was eating the cookies, he would have been able to taste what they were.
That's my point. He was eating them.
He's so delusional.
No. He was eating them.
Yeah.
And he's just like, "Yeah, right." And I think
so the word.
No, he was literally eating them too. And he goes,
So do the cookies actually taste, or are you saying he like deluded himself into thinking that the cookies taste good because his ego was so...
Yes.
Nice point. I like that. And here's another detail that stuck out to me. When he was facing trial for the fraud, I think it came from his lawyer earlier on when they said he was looking at a prison sentence of 2 to 5 years.
Yep.
And then the Judge Brown, the one who was going to treat him tough,
or actually treat him to the letter of the law.
Yeah, and she handed down a sentence of 18 months.
Yeah,
which is like less than the minimum we were given originally.
Oh yeah.
Like like even with this, where he got the judge who was going to go hard on him, he still got below the original like minimum estimate
of prison.
I know.
And also like the fine was about the same.
Yeah, so I'm going to say like the final tragedy of this is if he'd gotten 5 years, he would have learned his lesson and come out a changed man and maybe rebuilt his relationship with his kids. 18 months, he didn't learn squat. He's going to be back to his old ways.
He actually said, "I get out of here in a couple months," and he's like doing okay.
I know.
So well, also, and I know this sounds really funny.
I'm not saying he needs to like suffer in prison, but it's
prison's not gonna. Okay, you know what else is not helping?
Yeah,
is that he's there for 18 months. He's probably not even there the full 18 months.
Yeah.
I'm willing to wager. And what also does not help is that he's doing the dishes and he's like...
So it's clearly a minimum security prison. He's not talking to his kids through glass. They just like let him out of cage. He seems to be standing on like the front lawn of the prison or something.
He also gets to cook a lasagna. I'm just like,
Right.
what's happening here? He has like access to a lot of things.
Yeah. Was it just me or did it look like the guards were just like letting him out in front of the prison to like...
No,
like,
I think there was a big thing around.
yeah, maybe. I didn't see any fences.
It looked like there was a
enclosing that
garden.
larger area. Yeah, I know. It's like, I was just imagining the guards looking like, it's fine. If he runs, we can catch him. He's not in that good a shape.
The point, I know we're nitpicking at the littlest things right now about how the justice system has failed us as people who want this man to suffer.
Well,
we're really not helping anything right now.
Well, no, I mean, I just think we're really looking into like the clues the movie is giving us about its future. So
okay, yeah,
okay, and then Mary, like you said, she kind of relaunches her career with this much more substantive, like semi-autobiographical novel. I think she called it a docu-novel.
Oh, Mary, yeah.
Is that a thing? Is that a word, or did she just make that up?
Docu-novel?
Yeah.
I've heard of that. I've heard... Well,
I'm not sure I've heard that word. But
I may have heard it from this movie and thought that it was a thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, like the story seemed to have a real problem with like whether we were supposed to be sympathetic to Mary or not, or like start out not, but over the movie kind of grow to understand and love her a little bit more, which was very uneven, but nonetheless, it was at the end, it's like, oh yes, I feel nice that she managed to break free of this crappy situation and revitalize her career. The audience is supposed to feel good about her getting her own kind of happy ending.
Well, I mentioned it before where I don't like the whole idea is that she revitalized her career getting out of the romance novels and instead getting a book that's, being taken seriously by the serious critics.
Right.
And also the ending that's meant to imply that's just like some people never change, and when she's flirting with that guy at the very end, no, please call me Mary. And I'm like, what is wrong with this?
Oh, that's
he's an attractive man. She's allowed to flirt.
Okay, so we were just talking about the movie The Lost City,
yes,
whose protagonist was also a romance novelist.
Yes.
And I think we agreed.
Why do you think we're...
I think we agreed that her getting out of the romance genre was a happy ending for her because she herself was unhappy with it. She herself like wasn't into that genre. Like she knew how to write blockbuster books, but she didn't like enjoy it because she wanted a more...
This was The Lost City.
The Lost City,
okay,
yeah.
thank you. Okay.
Compare and contrast to Mary, who like really loved it and saw it as art, and like she was putting her heart and soul into these quote unquote trashy romance novels. So like, yeah, definitely like the fact that she broke free of that definitely kind of seems more like the movie was, taking a bit of an editorial judgment against like, know, she like and kind of implies that the audience was supposed to see her as like this kind of,
right,
airheaded artsy type who was creating schlock and thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
And the fact that the end is just like, oh, Mary, she's doing it again. I'm like, it is a guy who talked about the specifics of the art of her book.
Right.
I think he was talking about the post... I can't even remember the expression that he used, but it's just like...
Right, postmodern something.
Something metaphor or something like that.
Right.
And she's just like, oh, no, I'm Miss Fisher. And I'm just like, again, he's engaging with her and she is flirting back. What is the problem? Oh, Mary, you're doing it again. I'm just like, no, go for it.
Yeah, I guess I read that as a bit more of like, oh, this is at least a guy who's being more sincere with her. This was a guy who like, believed in what he was saying, like not just like kind of putting a line on her. So it's like,
right.
oh, I think, like this could be an actual relationship,
Now,
like,
if they did it to where he had like a woman next to him who was like frumpy
right.
and on his arm, that would be a whole thing. But I'm not really sure what the whole point of was, just like, and some people never change. And she's just like, no.
Yeah, no, I saw that. And I didn't see that as a some people never change. I saw that as
no, that's literally a line.
Oh, when
people can change, but you can't expect miracles. Even Mary Fisher.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot about that. That's interesting.
Yeah. But my thing is like, I guess we could.
I guess
push it on a hopeful.
It's like it's an incremental change because at least like, you get the sense that like he's not just flattering her, or at least it's not empty flattery. It's it was like it was a genuine compliment of her book. So, and that's what she was responding to. So
okay,
yeah.
We really want to like her, don't we?
It's freaking Meryl Streep. What are you going to do,
Well, maybe you shouldn't watch The Devil Wears Prada.
Yeah.
Because I was having a hard time.
Mhm.
Yeah, anyways. Okay. So what
And then
happens next? I mean,
Ruth is okay. So yeah, as I was getting at before, this is not this is not just a revenge power fantasy. It's very much an economic power fantasy.
Okay.
A conspicuously 80s one of.
Well, how else are you supposed to do it?
Yeah, exactly. And I would be amused to see Ruth getting swept up in the success of her employment agency, and clearly that's meant to be like her future. It's like, oh, she lost her domestic life, or I guess she's probably still gonna be taking care of those kids. We never really got a clear answer on where those kids are winding up, or if she's gonna be.
I think she had to take them when he got
them
in.
I mean, that would be your assumption, but we never see a scene of her like once again being a mother to them and living in the same house as them. We have to kind of assume that's the case because there's no other explanation, but that's not like really portrayed as part of Ruth's future.
Again, with the subtleties of it, the fact that the kids were nice and saying, "Oh yeah, these cookies are great, Daddy." They were not.
Oh yeah,
quick to say.
So okay, so they emotionally matured a little bit too, which is nice. But I'm more interested in Ruth's future as an entrepreneur and business business leader, captain of industry, and I would be amused if Ruth were to, get swept up in the success of it and the sense of power and wealth, and maybe fell a little bit into becoming a little bit more like Bob. Maybe she, has a handsome young man as an assistant, and maybe finds herself taking advantage of her position a little bit and falling into that trap of success that she's never really, had to face that temptation before.
I'm a little disappointed that we didn't talk more about Nurse Hooper.
Okay.
And in what you're saying, I don't want to do that, because in my head she's like, how dare you, honey? She is a woman. She's not going to be powerful in that she does what Bob does and falls into the same trap. But with the way you're describing it, though, I'm just like, yeah, and it's up to Hooper to bring her back.
Right.
I don't know. I just want her to have some damn friends.
Right. Yeah.
I wanted to have a support system, not just like, I did this all and I did it on my own, which of course she didn't. She needed all those women.
Right.
So, but I don't like that all of them are grateful to her because what she did for them, not because of who she is.
Yeah.
And that feels a little bit off.
Oh, you're such a heroine. You rescued us from...
Where would I be without you?
From social irrelevance and economic uselessness. I don't know. Yeah.
But at the same time, though, there still is the basic financial of the fact that, that woman who she put in the, the court job.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, she's just like, the job is going very well. I'm like, great. She's able to support her children because after her husband left her. So that's still.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to minimize the practical necessity of helping these women make livings.
I mean,
that's great.
The movie did.
Yeah. The
movie did. So why not?
It definitely simplified the whole issue. And,
right.
But yeah, I mean, oh yeah. And if Hooper has a fulfilling friendship with Ruth, that's great. And let's go ahead and give her a handsome boyfriend too, but without the power dynamic baggage, I guess.
Handsome boyfriend?
What?
Handsome boyfriend?
Or
Shrek?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever her proclivities are.
Or sure, whatever.
I don't know. I was flipping through, and I think Linda Hunt is actually a lesbian in real life. So
okay, yeah. I mean, I don't. That day and age, if the subtext would have come across differently, I don't know. But
I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm also just moderately sad at that scene where they bonded over just a bunch of food, or a bunch of actually cakes and.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think I saw one review in particular that was like, "Oh, and that's all it needs to win her over." It's like.
Well, at the very least,
here, have a brownie. Oh my God, you see me differently than everyone else.
Well, the only thing I could speak to is, you never treat yourself. Have one.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that there was substance, it's like, it's like...
There isn't really substance, though, because let's watch these two people be disgusting over food together.
Right. It was more like, it wasn't so much win her friendship by offering a brownie. It's like, recognize her self-worth as symbolized by a brownie. That's a little better.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I guess the kind interpretation would just be this woman, hey, you never give yourself anything, or you never do anything for yourself. Here, try this out. And it's even proven by the fact that she pulls out her checkbook and shows that she has all this money in savings.
Right.
So I'm just like, oh, and by the way, I did a calculator. And in today's, because it's $55,000, and I'm like, cool, that could get you a down payment on a Tesla now.
Yeah, like even adjusting for inflation,
It's about $150,000.
I was saying that's still pretty thin to launch a business, but yeah.
Yeah.
Even,
Especially in New York.
I know, yeah. Even adjusting for inflation, that was like, that is not a ton of money for what they're doing. So
especially for like 20. But again, it's the 80s, and we're talking about like Mary Fisher money here. So
right, yeah. So I'm glad we had this talk, because you're pointing out a lot of like I not enough that I think it really saves the movie, but I think you are pointing out where the substance does come from, because like you looked at like the Rotten Tomato score for this movie.
it didn't. What was it?
It was 40%.
What?
And I was surprised.
I'm surprised that's pretty high.
That is higher than I expected.
That's high. I assumed this was going to be in like the 20s or lower.
And you're actually filling in a lot of gaps. That makes a little bit more sense why like 40% of the critics would have thought this was...
I'm curious how many of them are contemporary appreciating Meryl Streep and how many of them are just like, what is happening right now?
I know. I was going to say, a lot of them were probably falling over themselves to praise like, Meryl Streep, oh my God, I didn't expect her to be this good in a comedy, you know?
So like even the more serious critics thought that...
Right, yeah, something like that.
Maybe.
But, yeah.
I don't know. It has its moments. It definitely misses stuff on rewatch, but overall, like, see, power is nuanced, revenge is nuanced now. So it's just like, see, this just seemed like she's like, slashing and burning,
right?
And in turn,
literally burning,
literal burning,
and exploding.
And it's just like I can't really tell if she's mad at Bob, she's mad at Mary, she's mad at both of them,
or mad at the world.
Well, no, because if she was mad at the world, she would say, "Fuck you, Hooper! I'm going to steal your money."
Mad at everyone who's not a frumpy middle-aged woman.
They can be younger.
Sure.
They could be older. She liked the people at the nursing home with the soccer matches and.
Right. Okay, man. Fine, middle-aged or elderly.
I don't know. So yeah, I mean, if you ever wonder, I had mentioned this to you offline before, and I didn't want to say it as much, but yes, it was the Roseannes and the Ricky Lakes and the Janine Garofalo's that I leaned towards, because why would I'm not Sandra Bullock. See earlier episode.
Right.
I'm not.
I mean,
I'm not I'm not Julie Roberts. I'm not. I'm not any of these pretty girls, so I want to see success here.
And just to give my masculine impression, like, okay, like with like the makeup and the presentation and everything, they genuinely made Roseanne look visually unappealing in this movie. But for your other two examples, like Ricky Lake and Janine Garofalo, it's like they look perfectly attractive in those films. Right. So I don't, the visual language, as it were, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just, again, one last thing. It shouldn't matter. But the scene where she stepped on the scale, I'm like, oh, that's okay.
Right.
I'm familiar with that number. Anyways, so it's there.
Yeah.
It hurts and it doesn't hurt. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, I hope this trip down memory lane wasn't too painful for you, but it was. Your perspective is unique and valuable, and this was definitely an interesting experience for me, and I thank you for it.
Really?
And I don't say that as like, well, I suffered through this movie, but it was interesting. It's like, no, the whole way I was like, I am fascinated that, well, number one, I'm fascinated that Diana ever liked this movie in the first place, and I definitely have some questions, and that itself made it like, I like I said, I wasn't bored and I wasn't grumpy. I was just like, what is going on here? I can't wait to do the podcast. So an enjoyable viewing experience by other means, I guess. So. And
you're happy that I answered all these questions, because now you got to watch your back.
Sure.
All right. Whew. Okay. Well,
I'll keep the appliances away from you if you ever get that look in your eye.
Oh, sure. So we did it? Question mark.
Hooray!
Alrighty. I don't know what we did in this one, but
we definitely did something.
I appreciate you indulging me for this.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing me along.
At the very least, I got to purge a little bit of some kind of previous angry Diana, what have you. It's important to look back and take stock sometimes. What are your assets and liabilities? No, I'm kidding. So many. Alrighty. So if you have any opinions about She-Devil, we want to hear them. So reach out at Twitter and Instagram at HEAMCast, HEAMCAST, Facebook on Happily Ever Aftermath, and contact at HEAMCast.com if you want to email us. Yeah, and I'm at Ryan Skonnord on Twitter. You can find me retweeting and liking HEAMCast. Yes. If you don't know how to spell that. And if it's not out already, I was a guest on the podcast But Make It Scary. And I took the movie 27 Dresses and I turned it into a scary movie. So check that out. It's called But Make It Scary.
Yes, it was a highly detailed effort that Dinah put a lot of work into. So you can have high expectations for that. No, I'm just...
Alrighty. And so now with that raging endorsement.
Yeah.
Ryan, thank you again.
Thank you too.
All right. Until next time, may your aftermath be happy.